Hello everyone. I am not Sharon Holte. I'm actually Lisa Lundgren, but my computer was having some technical difficulties. So pretend that my name says Lisa until I switch over from Sharon's name. Regardless, welcome everyone to our fourth and final webinar in the Women in Paleontology series. Thank you so much for coming. We're so excited tonight to have Dr. Lisa White, who is the Director of Education and Outreach at the University of California's Museum of Paleontology in Berkeley. I'm, like I said, Lisa Lundgren, so we'll be having two Lisas tonight. I'll be serving as the moderator this evening, and I'm a science education graduate student working on my doctorate via the Fossil Project. For those of you who haven't joined a webinar with us before, tonight's installment is the last of a four-part series we have offered in partnership with the Paleontological Society, and it has been facilitated via iDigBio's Adobe Connect platform. Some of you may know that we're looking forward to continuing our webinars in fall 2017. The fall series will focus on fossil identification, and we hope it will be similar in setup to PBS's Antiques Roadshow. So stay tuned for updates as that planning progresses. And you can learn more about our webinar series and the Fossil Project in general at www.myfossil.org. And we invite everyone here, if you haven't already, to become a member via signing up and participating in the MyFossil community. We also thank you all who are already members for participating. So just before we get started, a little bit of housekeeping. The webinar will be ending no later than 8 p.m. Eastern Time. The way that we intend for this to work is that Dr. White will speak for about 30 minutes, after which we'll open it up for discussion and questions. So we encourage you to take notes and type your questions in the chat box in order to facilitate a question and answer session after the presentation. Just to let you know, no one except for Dr. White and myself have active microphones. If you can hear us and you can see the PowerPoint, you are good to go. But if you're having trouble, try exiting the program and re-entering Adobe Connect. Or you can type in the chat box for technical support from our team. Also, don't forget to take our short survey after the webinar ends. It's really important for us because it's for reporting purposes for our funding agency, the National Science Foundation. So we truly appreciate your time in taking the survey. And as I mentioned before, you may type questions and comments in the chat box at any time during the webinar, but know that Dr. White won't be addressing your questions until the Q&A time. So this webinar is being recorded, and both the recording and Dr. White's presentation will be made available in the resources section of www.myfossil.org. And lastly, in case you don't already know, by attending or watching all four webinars, you can receive what's called a certificate of completion. And in order to complete this certificate and earn it, you have to be signed in with your full name. You have to remain and participate for the full hour. You have to be a member of the MyFossil online community. But if you have any questions about this, you can contact the project coordinator, Eleanor Gardner, via the MyFossil website or via email. So with all of that out of the way, it's time to hear from Dr. White. We'll let her get started now.
Thank you, Lisa. Hi, everyone. I really appreciate you participating in the webinar tonight. And I thank myfossil.org and also the Women in Paleo program for inviting me to share my journey with you. It's interesting when I think of the paleontologists that I know, and when I was listening and reviewing some of the early webinars in this series, you know, many paleontologists know from the time they're young that they wanted to study fossils. You know, we fall in love with dinosaurs early, or you go to a museum and you're completely drawn in. So my path is a little bit more unusual. I did grow up very close to the California Academy of Sciences in San Francisco, but I didn't really make the connection with science there. I think, you know, upon reflection now, that was a very early impression, I'm sure. But I'm eager to share with you just the ways that I found paleontology a little bit by accident. So I'll talk about that journey. And my first motivation in life was actually to become an artist and photographer. And then along the way, I've really embraced the importance of mentoring and training the next generation of scientists and paleontologists, and really trying to bring others to the field that we all love so much. And the current position that I have now at the University of California Museum of Paleontology has been for the last 5 years. So I'll highlight how my earlier uh, career experience has really shaped all that I hope to bring to my current job. And we should have plenty of time for questions at the end. And I just look forward to hearing from all of you as well. So I was looking through some early photos, and my quest in life, well, early on, so pre-college, was to become the black female Ansel Adams. I just really fell in love with photography, and growing up in San Francisco in the 1960s and 70s was an adventure to say the least. There were a lot of distractions, a lot of arts going on in music, and I had older sisters that were really involved in the arts, and they were my earliest mentors along with my parents, and so I wanted to do what they did. And I actually went to a great high school in San Francisco, but I wasn't really tracked into the science classes, so I just tended to focus more on the arts. And when I went to college, so I stayed close to home and attended San Francisco State University as an undergraduate. And as earth scientists, we often like to share our memories of certain events, geological events, hazards. Where were you during the 1989 earthquake, or where were you during the tsunami? And we remember those things. They mark our lives. And for me, I actually took a geology class as a general education requirement as I was on my path to an art major. And it was the year Mount St. Helens erupted. So I'm showing my age. That was 1981, I believe. And so good fortune for me. I'm just taking this geology class as a requirement. The instructor that I had was super enthusiastic. I think we can all cite geology professors who are on the spectrum from goofy to crazy to fun and engaging. But there was something about the closeness, the proximity of Washington State to where I was, and that he brought samples of ash in, and there was this connection to the earth that I don't think I appreciated before. Although, as someone who really loved Ansel Adams as a photography major, I think I was really drawn to the landscapes and wondering what made up those landscapes. So that's what initially motivated me to take a geology class, because I did want to learn more about what I was shooting. So that class was a real turning point for me in just thinking about the natural world and all of the cool tools that earth scientists use to study. And that particular professor told me about internships at the U.S. Geological Survey in Menlo Park. And that's where the initial connection to paleontology came. I was really fortunate to volunteer and eventually have a paid internship at the USGS as an undergraduate. I think we take for granted now that undergraduates, especially if they want higher degrees, advanced degrees, absolutely we should expect them to have research experiences as an undergraduate. But it was more unusual in the 80s, so I always felt really fortunate that I got to work hand in hand with geologists. And I went out on some mapping projects in New Mexico and Alaska, and I eventually found myself working with the paleontology and stratigraphy branch that existed at that time. And I was just absolutely intrigued, the same way that I was that, volcanic ash can tell you so much about the interior of the earth. I was fascinated that small fossils held all these clues about past environmental conditions. And it was really at the U.S. Geological Survey that I had my first mentors. The professor I had for that first geology class was a great advisor, but it was at the USGS, even as male dominated as it was at that time, I met some female geologists, and they were really instrumental in my own career and really encouraged me to go on and pursue uh, the the field. So I majored and graduated with a degree in geology from San Francisco State. I kept the photography and art background as a minor. And in graduate school, I entered the Department of Earth Sciences. So that's what my PhD is in. And so it was very Earth systems before I think we defined it as much as we do now. And I was really the only paleontologist in my lab. It was mostly a sedimentology lab, and we had geochemists and sedimentologists and stratigraphers. So along this journey, it's been really wonderful to remain in the Bay Area. I certainly have a sense of adventure and I love to travel, but I feel fortunate that I've been able to make my career here. And so returning to San Francisco State as a professor after I received my doctorate at Santa Cruz was really special. And I'll talk more about those years and, of course, my current job now at the UCMP. But when I reflect on my time, so there I am in 1978 as a high school student, trying to be the black female Ansel Adams. And then there's another photo, 30 years later when I was a professor, taking students to areas that I used to photograph, as an art major, and now, guiding them in geology. So you never know where life is going to take you, right? So I did want to list some of my different positions because they really have influenced the scientist and the paleontologist I am now. And just in case I forget to detail some aspects of my training and my positions, these really encapsulate the journey that I chose or that came to me really because on the one hand I'm a planner, I like to know what's going to go on, the next week, the next day, but at the same time, I'm a risk taker and I was just completely open to the kinds of positions that may have been available to me. And so as I have taken on this newer role as a museum education director, I've really drawn on the time that I spent as a faculty member, the time I spent as a program director for diversity programs. And so I'll explain more about the SF Rocks and SF Metals programs. While I was a professor at San Francisco State, I taught classes in paleontology, mostly invert paleo, taught historical geology, introductory geology courses, you name it. San Francisco State University is it's a comprehensive university, emphasis on teaching, and so we did a lot of service courses, which were really great. And I've been told at various times in my career that earth scientists actually make good administrators. We tend to be fairly good communicators as scientists. Our training is so cross disciplinary that we're more likely to have some experience in either coursework and training at disciplines other than just geology. So, in biology, chemistry, and physics, and of course, math. So I've tried to really incorporate both my training as a scientist and as an administrator in shaping the kind of work that I do now. And I've been recognized for the work that I do, both by the Geological Society of America and the California Academy of Sciences. And so much of it started from that one class, then the internship at the USGS, great mentors, a terrific graduate program, and the opportunity to do micropaleontology research as part of the ODP or IODP program was also a big part of my career. And want to acknowledge my parents. My father is an educator. He's professor emeritus now of psychology at University of California, Irvine. And my mother is retired as well, and she did public health nursing in her career. But I love to mention them, especially in the context of mentoring and broadening participation in diversity, because within their own fields, they were always looking out for others and wanting to collaborate with more individuals and making sure that everyone felt included. And so we always felt that way in our home, growing up in San Francisco, that everyone was included. And they didn't look at me funny, when I said I wanted to do geology. Not knowing any earth scientists anywhere in our family tree, I think they were a little surprised, but still the same. They were very supportive of what I wanted to do. So to talk a little bit about my research training, so after I made that connection through USGS scientists to paleontology and microfossils, I began working initially on the Monterey Formation. So I did my dissertation on that unit. So it's Miocene in age, and it crops out really in a number of places all up and down the coast ranges in California. And then you find equivalents around the Pacific Rim as well. So diatoms today really can live in all environments, but they're especially uh, their blooms are especially intense where there are strong upwelling zones and significant circulation. So they're really great proxy for all sorts of oceanographic conditions. Really trying to pinpoint what was going on in both water temperature and chemistry at that time. So I've looked in detail at sedimentary fabrics. I've done biostratigraphy. I'm really interested on a variety of timescales at how these tools, microfossils, what great tools they are, not only for telling geological time, but also for being able to really think about short-term changes in geological history. So I've been out to sea, well, several times on this ship, and then other times on smaller vessels. But it's really a special opportunity to sail on a drill ship like the JOIDES Resolution. When you think of the early evidence for plate tectonics and how much we know about the seafloor today, really came from exploring the marine sediments on the seafloor and really being able to date them in a way that lent the support for just how young the ocean floor is. So it's a special opportunity when you're a micropaleontologist on a ship like this. And I sailed to the Japan Sea while I was still in graduate school. It was my first experience at sea as a micropaleontologist. And then later on, as a professional, one of my first sabbaticals at San Francisco State, I sailed on a Costa Rica margin leg, which was focused more on tectonics than paleoceanography, but still the same. You need to be able to date the core. And I'm happy to report I'm going to be going back out on the ship this summer. It's a cruise. It'll be what we call a transit cruise, so that we won't be coring. The ship will be moving from Subic Bay in the Philippines to the Great Barrier Reef. And so we'll be bringing pairs of high school educators and also early career faculty. So it'll be great to be out, and I'll be in an instructor role. I should say, as a micropaleontologist interested in siliceous sediments and all their diagenetic equivalents. So when diatoms and diatomites and sediments containing diatoms are buried, the diatoms dissolve and the silica reprecipitates into rocks like quartz chert or porcellanites. And you can also get these really, really unusual diagenetic features. So the person for scale there is standing near a very, very large carbonate concretion. And that was in Russia. I did a field project in the early 2000s that looked at equivalents to these diatomaceous units in that part of the Pacific. And when you have organic rich sediments that are deeply buried and diagenetically transformed, as the organic material breaks down, you can get these gas seeps. And so at these seeps, you get a lot of venting of the CO2, and eventually you can get carbonate forming. So there's all sorts of additional sedimentological questions I often have as I'm doing this work. And there's hazards with field work. Those were very fresh bear tracks as we were doing work along a stretch of beach in Sakhalin Island, Russia. So you just never know, right, what the hazards are in our field. But but I love doing field work. I don't do quite as much of it now. We're actually doing virtual field experiences with a current project at the UCMP. But I've really enjoyed that work, and I've really tried to share it with some of the youth that I've worked with in college in programs that are really focused on pre-college students. So when I was at San Francisco State with funding from the NSF, I developed a program called Reaching Out to Communities and Kids with Science in San Francisco. So SF Rocks. And then Metals was like SF Rocks 2.0, minority education through traveling and learning in the sciences. And with that program, we uh, really expanded our base of collaboration, not just working in the San Francisco Bay Area, but I had partners at University of Texas El Paso, University of New Orleans, Purdue University. We all combined efforts and brought as many as 40 high school students out in the field with us every summer. Don't ask me how I survived that. I don't have kids of my own for a reason because I'm good for about 2 weeks, with well, with teenagers anyway. But there are so many terrific things that we expose the students to during this program. And so would typically be a 2 week trip or 2 week research experience for them, sometimes taking place on or around the university campus where we were working or in partnership with other scientists. And most students, really, really love earth science and the ability to learn outdoors. They just haven't always had opportunities to learn as much about it. Unfortunately, earth science gets to relegated to the low track and so much high school instruction, and we're still fighting those battles at trying to get it uh, uh, classified as lab science. So we have a lot of work to do as far as being able to expose students to earth science at a young age. Well, certainly with the next generation science standards, really there's lots of earth science and earth system science that's infused. But our philosophy in the SF Rocks and SF Metals programs were really just to get students learning outdoors. And just glancing at some of the questions that are coming through, um, it's shocking how much time kids spend indoor these days. I mean, for all the reasons that we know happens as digital generation, getting them to places where they can smell the air and go out to sea and collect data and gain some appreciation for why our field is so important is something that I've really devoted a lot of my career to. And it's been wonderful in my partnerships with other universities, with UT El Paso and Purdue and University of New Orleans, because I've gotten to explore, some other coastal areas. Being such a West Coast person, um, I have new appreciation, for areas that experience, extreme subsidence, and certainly running this program in the years after Katrina brought a new sense of urgency, of why studying earth science is so important. And so we spent time not only with the kids from New Orleans, but also the kids we were bringing from the Bay Area and from West Texas to just really, really engage with the science in these areas. So it's been really important to me, as a scientist, as a paleontologist, who really is hoping that we continue to diversify the field to bring youth to places that are special to earth scientists and that are really wonderful places to learn. So I want to transition now in the remaining part of the talk at some of the things that I do now. So my training's been, very field based and, collecting data on ships on land. And now my role really as the education director at the Museum of Paleontology at Berkeley is to take all of the really wonderful work of geoscientists, of paleontologists, and shape it in a way that's really useful to broader audiences. And so we have a very rich website at the UCMP. We have a number of very popular websites. Understanding Evolution receives more than 1 million page views every month, particularly during the school year. It's won awards. It's the go-to one-stop shop for all things evolution. And the site has been translated to several other languages. And even in the days before I was the education director at the UCMP, I was on the advisory board for this web resource and appreciated it when I was doing classroom instruction. And we know from all of the feedback we continue to get on the site that it really has helped shape the way that people are able to improve their teaching and evolution and um, help cut through a lot of misconceptions and preconceptions people have about the topic. Another popular web resource that we have is called Understanding Science. So the emphasis here is on the nature and process of science, sort of blowing up the scientific method. It's not just about only one thing. Science is not linear. It's iterative. It's ongoing. It's a process. Um, it's a human endeavor. And this tool and this site has really helped shape the way that a lot of instructors approach, teaching science. And so you have a sort of continuum of students really learning the value of not only collecting data the first time, but after you review and interpret and share it with others, sometimes you need to go back, to the drawing board and review, or you might revise hypotheses or have new questions as a result of that. So it's these kinds of tools that I've now tried to merge with the first part of my career and what I do now. That is really bringing to light how diverse science as a is, and how many connection points there can be for individuals who are interested in science. Science is no one thing. Even our discipline of geoscience and paleontology is no one particular organism. So there's room at the table for everyone, and there are just so many benefits to the kind of work that we do, and this sort of iterative exploration that is science can be just as exciting as the particular discipline itself. That is just reflecting on why science is so important, and really embracing that spirit of exploration and discovery can really draw students in of all backgrounds. And so we've really tried to highlight that on our websites. And we're to a point now as we continue to develop online materials at the UCMP, is thinking about the next big topic. And the next big topic is here. I mean, it's been here for a while now. But given how much that we know now about measurable global change and the need to really want to teach to this topic, we probably will never live in a world where this topic is not politicized, but it's certainly our role as scientists and as a major museum to really give light to this topic and draw from both the deep time record as well as the recent record to show just how much the globe is changing. And so we've been developing this website for a number of years now with support from the Gordon and Betty Moore Foundation. And we hope that this site will be as popular and as effective as our other sites in the Understanding series. And what will be unique about this site is it's as much of a revelation and a chance to explore Earth systems as it is the drivers and the outcomes of global change. And so that is a really exciting new direction for us. So stay tuned for that in 2018. Now, on the research end of things, so in my current role, my major duties are not research, but I work around researchers every day. And it's my role as a science communicator, with training in paleontology and training in geology and earth science to really try to translate the information that the scientists generate to teachers and the public in ways that really support learning. But we did recently at the museum receive a grant to digitize and improve the curation in our invertebrate fossil collection from the Cenozoic. And we have 9 partners in this, and it's a really great collaborative. And one of the largest roles for me and the team that's doing the education and outreach is we'll be developing virtual field experiences. And on the one hand, I think, oh, how have I come to this point in my life? It's all about the field, it's a sense of adventure. And now I'm doing virtual experiences, but it's a new day in virtual experiences. We're actually using story maps, which is an Esri program, and with the tools in photography now with gigapen resolution, gigapixel resolution photographs. It's really going to be a wonderful journey that we feel that we're able to take people on through these virtual field experiences. So we're continuing to add to our online resources, and we're hoping that if we can't bring everyone to the field, we can bring the field to them through this immersion in these really, really special places. And as a person, as a science educator in a very visible role at a museum, I am invited to um, I'm invited to participate in quite a number of things, including projects such as the Bearded Lady project. So it looks like we've restarted Adobe Connect. It sounded like a couple of people um, had blank screens. So sorry about that. But this is a very, very interesting project that's being guided by a number of artists who, begin just documenting the life and work of a number of female paleontologists, and many of us have shared our experiences of working in the field of discrimination. And as I remember it told to me about the beginnings of this project, one of the female paleontologists who had extensive field work in areas for years at one point said, it would just be easier sometimes if I could just put on a beard, and do my work. So that was the origin of this project idea. And so a number of us were photographed, in beards. And I encourage you to go to the website and just learn quite a bit more about some of the female paleontologists who are doing amazing things. And even with all the challenges and the obstacles that we face, they're doing remarkable things. And we're just completely committed to ensuring that others are as excited as we are about the field. So, in conclusion, when I think about my early path and my current path, I still like to think of myself, as a visual artist and someone who, is very observant, whether it be fossils or field areas or, students on a field trip. Being able to really connect really all parts of this discipline to others in a way that just makes it exciting, excuse me. And I think the emphasis that, we really place now, especially in graduate student training on science communication, this is all the more important. And when you can communicate your own personal experiences that have shaped how you conduct and um, what motivates you as a professional scientist to study, I think it makes it all the more real, to youth that may not have everyday access to paleontologists or geologists, but who may have really a lot of interest in it. And I'm part of a group called the Coalition for the Public Understanding of Science, COPUS. So we're a lot of high energy people, very dedicated to science communication and highlighting just why science is so important. And we had a really wonderful field meeting in Mexico, in the Yucatan and Chicxulub. And so we had a day of service. We really connected with the Mayan community there and did a day-long science fair. And so I was all excited, to have a station where kids could experiment with impact craters. And so, when you're at a place and practically in ground zero for the KPG, it was really nice to bring some of the science to the youth in that area. So thank you for being part of this webinar tonight, and it looks like we have about 20 minutes for questions.
Okay, thank you so much, Dr. White. It was such a great presentation and really interesting to hear all the intersections of your interests and how they really coalesced over the years. It's now the time for question and answers. So I'm going to open it
Okay.
up to everyone to have for questions and a discussion. And anyone is welcome to be typing questions in the chat box. And I'll read each one out loud and ask Dr. White to respond.
Okay.
So, Dr. White, one of the first questions we got was, I think, from Old Fossil, who is also known as Bruce McFadden,
Hi,
probably.
Bruce.
And he said, he asked who was your major professor at UCSC?
Okay, so that was Robert Garrison, Bob Garrison. So he's a sedimentologist, introduced me to the Monterey Formation. He really focused on fine-grained sediments, and he was very enthusiastic supporter of mine and was happy to add a micropaleontologist to his lab. So, and given all of the silicious sediments that he studied for years, I think he'd only had a handful of micropaleo graduate students. And he's emeritus now, but he still lives in Santa Cruz, and I do see him fairly often.
Awesome. Thank you so much for telling us about that.
Oh, yeah.
We had another question about what do you do with all of the pictures that you take? I think this might have been in reference to some of the early photos that you were taking and
Right.
perhaps how this has continued through your career as a paleontologist.
Well, I really should digitize some of the early ones. I do have a portfolio in my mother's garage, in San Francisco of some black and white images that I took. I would develop my own photographs. And of course, this was in the era before digital photography. So those early ones, though, are kind of remarkable to me when I look at them. Some are a little rookie-like. It's like, oh, maybe I wasn't all that, but I was trying. And
Right.
then, and throughout my time as a professor, I would really draw on those early photographs and sometimes incorporate it into my learning materials and modules. I have sort of little photo contests for students, but yeah, I should really think about having a nice portfolio of the photography that I had through all the decades.
Yeah. This is kind of related, but Linda McCall had asked, and I think someone else might have asked earlier too, do you draw or illustrate any of your fossil specimens?
So not that much, and I have to smile a little bit with that question because I was a very frustrated sketch artist. I really couldn't draw that well, but I loved art so much, and I think that's part of what drove me really hard to photography. Is I felt that was really the best way I could express what I was seeing. And when I took paleontology as an undergraduate, I was one of those just grumblers and complaining all the time that we had to sketch because I wanted to be perfect and mine weren't that great. And so now I just embrace all the tools we have to image the fossils because I'm not that great of a sketch artist, but I always recognize the importance of doing it, but was
Yeah,
frustrated that I wasn't that good.
I identify very much with that. I don't feel like
Yeah,
I'm a very good artist at all, but I love taking photos.
yeah.
But I'm going to switch gears a little bit now because we had some
Okay,
questions about your research cruises. So
great.
Eleanor had asked how long the research cruise you're taking in the summer will take.
Right. So this summer's okay. So the School of Rock cruise is just a little over 2 weeks, and actually, I'll appeal to all of you. We are still accepting applications, and so can I? I might just go to the site while I'm talking, so that I can
Mhm.
post the application. Um, but it's
Yes,
so the
please do.
School of Rock. Okay, so yeah, I'm clicking around a bit to find it. And so this transit will be just a little bit over 2 weeks, and so we'll be using some of the core that is already on the ship from an earlier leg. that is exploring the South China Sea. And we really want to bring to light just all the mechanics of the ship and how important ocean history research is in just understanding the Earth in general. And so a 2.5 week cruise, uh, I know it seems like a a long time, but back in the day when I was doing the research cruises, those are 2 months, and um, uh, so a 2 week cruise is like just about right now. So okay, so
That kind of, and we had one more question related to research cruises. It was
okay,
actually from me. I'm Lisa. I'm not Sharon, even though it says Sharon talking. We were
okay,
having issues with my computer. But I was wondering if you could describe a typical research day while out in the field on a research cruise and how it
sure,
differs from an onshore research day.
right, okay, that's a great question. Uh, well, the cores come up incredibly fast when you're on a ship, and so just the focus on uh, gathering and getting material every day makes it a really fast-paced environment. And the role of the paleontologist is super important on a cruise. I mean, they're not going to do much more until they have an age of the core. And so that was always very exciting for me because we're the first to get a sample of the material when the core comes up, even before it's sliced open into the archive half and the research half, the sampling half. We're there making a smear slide and determining the age. And so that's exciting, but it also makes for a really fast paced environment. But it also is an environment where you can be so focused on the science and you don't have to worry as much about the logistics and mechanics of things because you're there. When I'm doing field work, there are just so many more pieces that I'm responsible for, in terms of getting to the site and, having the right maps and measuring section and figuring out where we're going to sample. Whereas in this case, we've already made a determination, as a science party where the sampling is going to happen, and then we just try to keep up with the material. I know micropaleontologists who just wouldn't be caught out at sea. They get seasick or they'd rather just work shore based
Mm-hmm.
or work on outcrop sections. But I've always really valued the opportunity to do both.
Wow, it's so cool to think about the differences that you can have as a researcher in the field in different environments. We're going to switch gears a little bit again, and Sherry had a question about students and young people. She said, "Do you think it's true that students nowadays aren't in touch with nature or the outdoors?" And I know you kind of spoke to that a little
Right.
bit webinar, but it'd be great to hear your perspective on that question.
Right. So I found that to be very true. And even students in areas like the Bay Area, where it's pretty easy to get outdoors and there's a lot of natural beauty all around, but there are kids from the Mission District in San Francisco that have never been to Ocean Beach, or kids that grow up near Ocean Beach that have really never been across the Golden Gate Bridge. And so you find that um, this the sort of narrowness of our world sometimes that a lot of youth experience makes it really difficult for them to be outdoors as much or feel that connected with nature. And I love to share this story with people just as a way to illustrate why it is so important to get youth outdoors. So one of the years we were doing an SF Rocks and SF Metals trip, we were meeting the New Orleans and El Paso groups in Yellowstone. So we were making our way. We were driving from California, and we were stopping in Idaho at some of the plateau basalts there, and there are those beautiful gorges and canyons that are cut in the basalt. So I'd been preparing the students all trip. Oh, you're going to see some great geology on the way. Just I can't wait to show you. So we get out of the car. One of our first stops is just this beautiful canyon, And the student, and this was a student who was already college bound, remarkable young man, very smart. But he took one look at this vista, which again was a beautiful canyon, and he said, "Is this real?" And it
Oh.
took me aback. Like I didn't know if he thought like we were Disneyland, if if it was like a fake outcrop. He explained to me later, yeah, they've never really seen or put his hands on real rocks, or seen a real or a geological feature that was that dramatic. And so I think that's what he was trying to explain to me is he was just amazed at what nature is capable of doing. And so
Wow,
and even
that
if
is.
our isn't that amazing though? Is this real? So even if our students have some taste of the outdoors, they've learning about what they're seeing has often not been as common an opportunity.
Yeah, and I think Sherry had another question related to that. She said that even though there maybe might be students who are interested, or youth who are interested in paleontology, they need their parents who are willing to support their interests and take them fossil hunting, and they have that, but that's not often possible. So, what do you suggest for kids like that?
Right. So I get a lot of those questions as the museum education director at UCMP. So, kids have an interest in fossil. Maybe their parents don't know where to take them or what they should be expecting to do at a museum if the kids are interested in fossils. And and it's rare, at least in California, to be able to go to a place where you can collect. But there actually is a place in Santa Cruz County where fossils are visible and collecting is allowed. Uh, but I just I encourage people to explore our online resources. Take advantage of museums wherever they go as an opportunity to see fossils. And I also share a lot that paleontology, it's a subdiscipline of geology, geoscience, or you can go the biology pathway to paleontology as well. So finding opportunities to learn more about a number of different sciences. So it's good training and preparation.
Yeah. And I think that that's a good segue into a question about the website, the University of California Museum of Paleontology website. Um,
Mm-hmm.
I think Eleanor had asked a question about do you know how many teachers approximately use the website or the info on the website in their classrooms?
Yes. Well, we've got Google Analytics that help us just track, the views to the web page, and so the two combined, the Understanding Science and Understanding Evolution websites receive 20 million page views annually. So that's an average. So it's a lot of traffic to the site. And as far as what schools use it or how it's been incorporated into curriculum areas, there are just dozens of schools. It could be in the hundreds actually across the country that utilize it. Some of it has really been formalized into their curriculum, and they've asked our permission to include it in lab manuals. Others they might just do a unit, but it's in textbooks. It's actually in one of the high school. Levine as the first author, or sorry, Miller and Levine high school textbook in biology. There's a chapter on nature and process of science, and the flow chart, the understanding science flow chart, is there. The how science works flow chart is there. And so, in the 10 years that it's been, yes, because I believe it was 2007 or 2008 when Understanding Evolution was launched. Um, it's remained very popular, and so we're looking at getting additional resources just to refresh the sites a little bit. Because now that we're going to launch Understanding Global Change, we might need to give our older websites a little bit of a facelift, and our main UCMP webpage we want to redesign as well. And so we just continue to invest in our sites. The UCMP really was the first museum to really leverage online sharing of information and from those early days in the early 90s when the UCMP website was born, to where we are now. It's just been an important part of our education and outreach history.
Yeah. It's cool to hear you talk about it. I got to use it for one of my
Really?
classes, and Eleanor and I, as you were talking about it being in the textbook, we were looking at each other, being like, "Oh yeah, I remember seeing that
Mm-hmm.
flow chart and everything." So this is
Right.
really
See, it's yeah, that's credit us. Yeah.
yeah. So our resident 11-year-old Olivia had a question for you.
Hi,
She was
Olivia.
wondering what you thought about CRISPR-9 and if it had any connections to Spinosaurus.
I don't. So maybe what's okay. I might need a little bit more information from Olivia since I study microfossils. Is that a new dinosaur? No, Spinosaurus.
I also don't have very much information about it, but I'm sure that Olivia would be happy to talk to
Okay.
you about it, and it looks like Bruce might be
Oh,
able
and
to
Bruce is typing.
say something
Yes.
as well. But in the
Okay.
meantime, we have a couple of more questions for you. This is related back to the research cruises.
Mm-hmm.
Eleanor was talking about how when she went on her research cruise, she did get seasick. So she was wondering about you and your issues with seasickness, if there were any, and how you dealt with that.
Right. Well, I don't get seasick on the Joyde's Resolution or larger ships of that type. So, it's 200 meters long and just an incredibly stable ship. Although I come prepared because I know from smaller cruises that I've been on, those sort of whale watching boats or boats where we're going out and sampling plankton, seasickness is a problem for me. I've done really everything from scopolamine patches to, Dramamine, and it can be a challenge. And when you study microorganisms, I mean, you're staring down a microscope and you're worried about your balance on a ship. So, but I do feel at home on the larger drill ships, so I've been okay there. But again, when I was mentioning that some micropaleontology colleagues that really don't go out to sea very much, I mean, it often can be because of that, the seasickness. But I'm hearing about, yeah, some new things now, just different kinds of wristbands that put pressure in key places that help stabilize an imbalance. So
Huh. So I think we have time for one more question, and it was a good one from George Powell. So aside from your really awesome sounding research cruise in the summer, he was wondering what's next for you.
oh, well, that's a great question too. So right now, when I won't be cruising, I will be working on the virtual field experience modules for the EPIC project. And so we have one on the Kettleman Hills, an area of California where there's a classic Pleistocene section. So I would take my undergraduate students there when I was a professor at SF State. So it's great to capture it in virtual form, and we're working on one of the Parissima Formation, which is also a Pliocene unit in California. So I have to stay close to home, close to the museum when I'm not cruising to try to get those finished this summer. And then we're also working hard to get the Understanding Global Change site launched, and we have a really great postdoctoral scholar that's leading that effort. But one new direction for me is for all that I love about field geology and paleontology in the field, I recognize that it's still a barrier to participation of a number of individuals that might have physical challenges. I think women in the field, we still experience issues that are unpleasant, and people that may have grown up, in different environments where they haven't been exposed to field geology. So I'm actually have support with a new NSF grant and a number of other partners. We're going to do some courses for leaders of field camps to really talk about some of the barriers and really how to overcome what have been negative experiences in field settings. so that they can continue to be really essential in our training. So I'm excited about that. So,
It sounds like you are going to be very busy and with lots of really awesome projects. So
right.
I think we're about out of time, but I'd love
Okay.
to once again thank you for giving us a great presentation and thank all of the participants for attending today. We do have a short survey for you to fill out. It's available on the lower right hand side and it should be being typed in. Oh, it's right there in the survey or on the PowerPoint in front of you as well. You can click the link directly from the presentation or on the one being shared in the chat box. But you'll be able to view this recorded webinar in the MyFossil website, or you can continue the discussion in our forum. So don't forget to stay tuned on our fossils website, our fall webinar series. But I think we're going to say goodbye for now and thank Dr. White once again for her wonderful presentation.
Great. Thank you, everyone. It was my pleasure, and I really appreciated all your terrific questions.
Thank you.
Thank
We'll talk to you
you.
soon.
Okay, take care, everyone. Bye bye.